Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is a double Parsha, Tazria-Metzorah, and we are going to be focusing on the Parshas Metzorah. So Parshas Metzorah begins Perek Yudala, chapter 14, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. Now, until now, as most of the Parshas, the previous Parsha Tazria has been involved with, is the laws regarding tsaras, that a person was stricken with a skin disorder that appears as primarily white spots. It can have other shades to it, and depending on all the other details that have to be fulfilled with this white spot, a person can become tameh, become ritually impure. And if he is a Metzorah, he actually has to be sent out from the city. People have to stay away from him. He needs the Kohen to first examine the spots, and it's the Kohen is going to decide and declare he is impure. And when these spots go away, you need the Kohen to declare that he can become pure. And when he does become pure, as is described in Parshas Metzorah, there is a whole set of sacrifices and a ritual that he needs to go through in order to become pure again and return back to regular life. So now, let's read Pasuk Perek Yudala, chapter 14, Pasuk Aleph. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemar. And Hashem said to Moshe to say, Zois tia Toras HaMetzorah b'yom Taharasai. This shall be the law of the Metzorah. Metzorah means the person who had been stricken with tsaras on the day of his becoming pure. V'huvo ela kohen. He shall be brought to the Kohen. V'yatza ha-kohen el michutz lamachaneh. The Kohen shall go outside of the camp. V'roah kohen, the Kohen shall see. V'hinei ner panegat tsaras min hatzarua. Behold, the affliction of tsaras has been healed from the person who had been afflicted with it. And then the Torah goes through the process of what he does to become pure. Now there is a problem here in pasuk, between pasuk Gimel and between pasuk Beis, pasuk Gimel, verse 2 and 3. Verse 2 again read, "This is the law of the Metzorah on the day he becomes pure. V'huva la kohen, he shall be brought to the Kohen." Now that word "he shall be brought" is interesting. What does it mean? People have to carry him? What does it mean he'll be brought to the Kohen? But one thing for sure, it means that he's coming to the Kohen. That's simply what it means. V'huva la kohen, he shall be brought to the Kohen. That means he is coming to the Kohen. But the problem is that in the next verse, Pasuk Gimel reads, "V'yatza ha-kohen al michutz hamachaneh." The Kohen shall go outside of the camp. Because as we said before, again, in the context of the Chumash, where the Jewish people are in the desert, and they have three camps. They have the camp of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. That is where the Mishkan is. Around the Mishkan, you have the Machane Leviah, the Levite encampment. That's where the Leviim were. And then you have the Machane Yisrael, the encampment of Israel, of the Israelites, for the rest of the Jewish people. A person who is stricken with tsaras cannot stay in any three of them. He has to leave all three. He is michutz lamachaneh. He is outside of the camp. And therefore, the Pasuk Gimel reads, "V'yatza ha-kohen al michutz lamachaneh." The Kohen will go out to outside of the camp. That sounds like it's the Kohen who's going to the person. The first Pasuk says, "V'huva la kohen," he shall be brought to the Kohen. That sounds like he's going to the Kohen. But now it says, "V'yatza ha-kohen michutz lamachaneh," the Kohen will go outside of the camp. It's the Kohen going to him. So which one is it? Is he going to the Kohen, or is the Kohen going to him? So there are a couple of explanations that are given. You've got the Ramban, that the Ramban explains that what this means is that, give me a second here. Okay, so the Ramban explains that V'huva la kohen, which means, and he shall be brought to the Kohen, means to say that the same way that he was declared impure through a Kohen, and it can only be through a Kohen that it can be declared impure. You could actually have someone that is fully knowledgeable in recognizing fully knowledgeable in recognizing if a person is stricken with saras. He knows all the signs, he knows all the laws, but if he's not a Kohen, he cannot say this person is impure. This person has saras. If he says it won't make a difference. His status doesn't change. If a Kohen comes and says, oh, he has saras, declares he has saras, that's when he becomes a Metzorah. That's when he gets the status of a person afflicted saras, and it becomes impure. So much so that if, let's say, the Kohen is an ignoramus, he doesn't know the laws, he doesn't know how to do it, right? And he brings in a Torah scholar who tells him, yeah, he has all the signs. The Kohen has to be the one to say he's impure. And if the Kohen doesn't declare it, he doesn't become impure. I mean, he's supposed to. But the point is that you need a Kohen's declarations. The Kohen is such an integral part that even if he himself doesn't know how to recognize it, he has to rely on somebody else. But somebody else is not the one who is going to make him impure. The Kohen has to be there to declare he's impure. Says the Torah now that the same way you must have the Kohen to make him impure, to make him pure again, you must have the Kohen. So v'huva ala Kohen means he's got to be brought to the Kohen. He's got to come together with the Kohen. The Kohen has to be the one to declare that he is pure. At the end of the day, practically speaking, who goes to who? It's going to be the Kohen going to the Metzorah, to the person. Because practically speaking, the person, right? The person who is stricken with saras, he's outside of the camp. He can't come into the camp. So how are they going to get together? It's got to be the Kohen goes there.
Maybe they have special spot.
They don't. Now. The Sephornu says something similar to you. Not a special spot, but rather it means like this. It means the like we say, the Metzorah, he's outside the camp. He can't come in. But he can come as close as possible so that the Kohen doesn't have to schlep out so far. Meaning as an act of respect to the Kohen, he should be able to meet the Kohen, right, as much as possible. Not to have to make the Kohen have to go all the way to him. He should come to basically as far as he can go, so that when the Kohen does go out to him, the Kohen won't have to go out, won't have to go so far. That's how the Sephornu explains. There is the Be'er Yosef, the commentary of Be'er Yosef, suggests another explanation, a very interesting halachic explanation. He wants to suggest the following. He starts off with a law, a halacha, and this is brought down in the Rambam. Kohen shetimai mitzvah l'taharai shenemar l'tara l'tamai. It is preferable. The way it should be done is that the same Kohen that made him impure should be the one that makes him pure. You should be using the same Kohen. That's what you should be doing. Okay, that's one thing he starts off with. The next thing he starts off with is the following, which is that when we talk about, I just explained that in the desert they had 3 camps, and then he had to be out of all 3 camps. What about when the Jewish people were in Israel? Did you have 3 camps there too?
No.
What?
Israel?
In Israel, once they settled in Israel, right? And they say, and a person got saras in Israel, right? So where was he sent out from? Where was he sent out from? Were there 3 camps?
No camps in Israel.
Okay, but were there something that corresponded to that? I mean, there's the Beis HaMikdash, right? There's Yerushalayim. Maybe it works like that. So the halacha is like this. The way it works is, and it's a very interesting. I mean, I think this is derived from words in the Torah. But the halacha is that there were cities in Israel that were surrounded by a wall, and there were cities that weren't surrounded by a wall. Cities that were surrounded by a wall had a greater sanctity than ones that didn't. A person who had saras, if he was living in a city that was surrounded with a wall, he had to leave. That's the equivalent of outside of the camp, which also meant that he couldn't enter a city that had a wall. But if, let's say, he lived in a city that didn't have a wall, He didn't have to leave. Now again, it says that he stays away from people and he doesn't cut his hair and he calls out to people, I'm impure. There's a lot of other things that still has to happen. But this idea about going out of the camp, leaving where he would live, that only applies again in Eretz Yisrael, when they're living in Eretz Yisrael, in a city that's surrounded by a wall. If it's not surrounded by a wall, so then he didn't have to leave, or he could go into. So therefore, the Ber Yosef wants to say like this: the pasuk that says "V'huva el hakohen," that he will come to the kohen, is talking about where he's going to come to the kohen. Why is he going to come to the kohen? I mean, why is he coming? The answer is because he's trying to find the kohen that made him impure, so that he should be the same one that makes him pure. So if that Kohen is in a city that doesn't have a wall, then he goes to the Kohen. But if, let's say, the Kohen who needs to make him pure, whether it's the same one, maybe even a different one, but let's say we're talking about the Kohen, he wants to find that Kohen who made him impure. If that Kohen lives in a walled city, he can't go in. And therefore, that's where the Torah says the Kohen goes out. Because since, again, the Kohen, we want to have the same Kohen who made him impure, making him pure, where he cannot come to the Kohen because the Kohen is in a walled city, the Kohen will then go out to him. So he is offering another explanation, different than the Ramban, different than the Sefornu, based on this idea that the Metzorah can't go into, goes out of a walled city, it can't go into a walled city, it has to remain outside of a walled city. That's the equivalent of what the Torah says outside of the camp. Therefore, we can say one pasuk is talking about where the Kohen is in an unwalled city, so he can go to the Kohen. But where he can't go to the Kohen because the Kohen is in a walled city, then we say the Kohen goes out to him. Now then, the Ber Yosef gives a very interesting thought about this whole idea that we say, well, if the idea of leaving the camp when they're in the land of Israel, that corresponds to either a walled city or not a walled city. What is there a way of explaining this idea? Like he leaves a walled city, but if it's not a walled city, he doesn't leave. What is there some message behind it or some kind of explanation behind that we can give? So the Ber Yosef suggests that that can be the following message. There is a Gemara, the Talmud in Erchin cites a pasuk from Tehillim Kuf Chaf, Psalms 120, and it says, the words read, Ma yiten lacha u'ma yosef lach l'shremiya. What can be given to you, what can be added to you, deceitful tongue. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu l'lashon. Hashem said to the tongue, meaning our tool of speech, he says, I surround you with two walls, meaning I have two barriers in front of you, meaning the tongue is the symbol of speech, of talking, okay? And it's a lashon ramiyah, it's a tongue of deceit. It's a tongue that's speaking the wrong things. So Hashem says, I've given you two walls. I've given you two blockades. What's that? The teeth and the lips. There's two things in front of you. And those things that are in front of you are meant to be two walls. They're supposed to remind you, right, to not just shoot off your mouth. You've got to keep your tongue behind walls. You've got to keep it protected. And you don't pay attention to it. So what more should I do for you? But there is this idea that the structure of a person's mouth, where you have the tongue is the power of speech, and you have the teeth and the lips in front of it, that there's this idea, it's meant to symbolize to a person that your tongue is behind not just one wall, two walls. It's behind something it's supposed to protect. It's behind something that's supposed to keep it back. Therefore, if that is part of the message of a person to a person who speaks badly, and the Gemara says that there are a number of sins that can cause a person to be stricken with saras, The primary one is speaking Lashon Hara, speaking badly about others, misusing one's speech. That can be the sin that causes a person to be stricken with saras. So therefore, if he lives in a walled city, that our message to him is, the same way your tongue has gone outside of its walls, you now have to go outside the wall. You haven't kept your tongue behind your walls, so now you got to go out of the walls. It's a symbolism to this reminder of how a person's tongue is meant to be behind two walls. You don't keep it behind two walls. You go out of the wall. You go out of the wall because you haven't kept your walls. The person who doesn't live in the city with a wall just doesn't have that message. Just doesn't have it. If he doesn't have it, then there's no point. So the idea, he says, behind having these walls is the idea of going out of the walled city, is this idea, this reminder of the fact that since you're not keeping your tongue behind its walls, you leave the wall. You leave the wall because you didn't stay behind the walls that protect you from guarding your speech. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a medrash. And the medrash says the following. The medrash says that there was a reichel, there was a peddler. And this peddler he came to a town, and in the town he was announcing, who wants a potion for life? Who wants a potion for life? That was his sales pitch. He comes to town, he's telling to everybody, who wants a potion for life? No. So a lot of people came around to see what he offers. He wants to know what he offers. Okay. Now there was a sage named Rabbi Yanai who heard this. He was, studying in his house, wherever he was, and he heard this person, making this announcement, and he said to him, I'm interested. The peddler says, it's not for you. It's not for you. You don't need it. He says, no, I want it. Come. Okay. So he came to Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai says, no, what's the potion of life? And the peddler opens up the book of Tehillim, and he shows him a verse from Tehillim, which we say every Shabbos. Miha ish hachavitz chayim, who is the man who wants life? Oyev yamin lirois tov, loves days to see good. Netzar l'shein chameira, guard your tongue from evil. Usafasach midaber merma, your lips from speaking deceit. This is what he showed him. Okay, so the question, what he was saying, so he asked, show me this potion for life. He opens up the Tehillim and he says, here it is. Here it is. That's what it says. You want life? Guard your tongue. Make sure you speak properly. And after that, Rabbi Yanai says that, there's another verse that's like that Shlomo HaMelech says, and that pasuk says, problem is I forgot my paper that had this, that is all on it. But the pasuk says, Shemer pivel l'shainai, a person who guards his mouth and his tongue. Shemer mitzaras nafshay, guards himself from the suffering of his soul. Okay, similar idea.
But is this also Tegrim?
No, it's a pasuk, I think, from Mishlei, from Proverbs.
Suffering of what?
Excuse me?
Suffering of
Nafshay, his soul.
Nafsho.
I think that's what it says. Okay, so he mentioned another verse similar, and then he declared, I've been reading this pasuk for years, and now I finally really know what it means. That's the end of the Medrash. Now, the Medrash brings us here because the Medrash takes pasuk beis that says, Zois hiya Tazria-Metzorah. This is the law of the Metzorah. And the Medrash takes the word Metzorah and turns it into what we call an acronym. Metzorah stands for Motzi Ra, or Motzi Shemra, one who spreads a bad name. This is the law of the person who spreads a bad name. That means you speak badly about others. This is the law. That's the kind of person who can be stricken with tsaras. Okay. So now the question is, the most obvious question is that Rabbi Yanai, he knew the pasuk. Not only did he know the pasuk, he brought another pasuk that said similar to it. So what does it mean that I never knew what it meant? It says what it means. There doesn't seem to be anything, earth-shattering about this interpretation of the pasuk. It's what the pasuk says. So what's the big deal? I never knew what it meant until now. So there is a commentary in the Medrash called Yefei Torah that explains like this. And if I understand and the thing is, it's like this. It's very interesting. He's a peddler. It calls him a roichel, a peddler. And so, and he goes around saying, "Who wants a potion of life?" And what's the potion that he talks about? At the end of the day, what's the potion? The Tillim, right? The verse in Tillim. So, is he a peddler or not? What is he? Is he a peddler? Is he a preacher going from town to town preaching? What is he? So the Yefei Torah, if I understand him correctly, actually says that he was the kind of person who actually went around town to people, gathered them together, and helped them really do teshuvah, to repent and correct their ways through the Torah. Who wants a potion for life? The potion for life is Torah. And this is what he would go ahead and he would, this is what he would share with people. Now, did he do it under disguise? He came in looking like a peddler, and people said, "Oh, they see a peddler." These people go from town to town. He looks like a peddler, okay? And then he says, "I have a potion for life," and everybody comes running. But at the end of the day, so was it kind of just like a shtick, a way of getting people in? I don't know. But the way that the Yefei Torah says is that what this person did was he would go around and help people through Torah improve themselves, make themselves better.
But he's selling?
Excuse me?
He's selling his...
It doesn't say. It doesn't say if he was doing two things at the same time. I don't know. It doesn't say. It doesn't say. But the Yefei Torah says that this is what he was doing. And he wasn't necessarily, according to the Yefei Torah, he wasn't specifically going around preaching about Lashon Hara. He was preaching, or he was helping people through Torah become better in general, whatever it may be. So Rabbi Yanai said, he hears this, who wants life? He's interested too. So the first reaction of the man was, you don't need it. You're a Torah scholar. You're a Talmid Chacham. You're a great man. You have Torah. You know through Torah what you need to do. So you don't need me. Rabbi Yanai said, still, I want to hear something from you. I want you to point out something to me. No matter who I am, I want you to point out something to me. So he opened up the Tillim, and he showed him the pasuk. Nitzar mihu shechavetz chaim, who wants life. Nitzar l'shein chameira, guard your tongue from evil. What was that message to him? The message to him was like this. As a Torah scholar, his job was to teach. His job was to rebuke. If the people needed to be told that they need to improve, he needs to say it. The problem is that, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. The problem is that sometimes the people who rebuke get too sharp. They say things in too sharp a way. And that's not correct. As much as you have to go ahead and rebuke and say what has to be said, you still have to be careful how you say it. You can't do it in there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And if you get too sharp or too harsh, that's not the right way to do it. So he showed him the pasuk, Nitzar l'shein chameira, guard your tongue from evil, which the message to him was that guard your tongue, even the tongue that's not saying anything wrong. On the contrary, the tongue is saying the right thing. Nitzar, you got to guard it. You have to watch it. You have to watch it. Then, which means you can be saying the right thing, but you still have to watch it. Make sure things don't go wrong even with that. So then Rabbi Yanai says, there's another pasuk. Shemer piv l'shaynai, one who guards his mouth and his tongue, guards himself from the sufferings of his soul. Okay, that also says guard your tongue. Shemer piv, guard your mouth and your tongue. Guard what you say. And then he adds, I never understood what this pasuk means, is not going on the pasuk of who wants life, guard your tongue from evil. It's going on the pasuk in Mishlei that said, Shemer piv l'shaynai, shemer mitzaras nafshay, one who guards his mouth and his tongue. He always had a question about that pasuk. The pasuk says, Shemer piv l'shaynai, one who guards his mouth and his tongue. You know what it should have said? It should have said, Haseger piv. If you close your mouth, if you keep your mouth closed, that is how you'll guard yourself from evil. Because the way that you should be, the way that a person needs to make sure he doesn't say the wrong thing, Rabbi Yanai always thought was, don't talk, be silent. That's really the way to go. If that's really the way to go, why didn't King Solomon say it that way? Why do he say one who guards his mouth? He should say one who keeps his mouth closed. The answer is what this peddler showed him. The peddler showed him that the point of the pasuk is that even when you're supposed to talk, you have to be careful. Which means the goal is not to keep your mouth quiet. The goal is not to make yourself mute. A person has to talk in life. And there's a lot of good things to talk about. A lot of important things to talk about. But when you do it, you have to be shomer. You have to guard it. You have to nitzar l'shayncha. You have to guard your tongue. So what Rabbi Yanai was saying is that Rabbi Yanai thought that the real way to go with guarding yourself in lashon hara is basically not to talk. And what this person showed him when he was giving him his little rebuke, which was that what the pasuk is saying, that even when you should talk, guard it, then that means that when King Solomon was also talking about guarding one's in a more general way, when he was saying shemer piv, one who guards his mouth, guards himself from the afflictions of his soul, from the tzaras of his soul, and didn't just say don't talk. He was also saying you need to talk. There are important things to talk about. There are good things to talk about, and you're supposed to do that. At the same time, you have to be careful of what you're saying. They're saying what's wrong, and that's for sure has to be guarded. But what has to be even more guarded is the fact that what even the good things to say, the things you're supposed to say, make sure that doesn't go off. Make sure it doesn't veer off in the wrong direction somehow. Which shows that in general, a person should not be trying just to not talk, but rather a person has to be talking, but he has to make sure that he talks in the right way. Rabbi Fran brings that the Chavetz Chaim, famous Chavetz Chaim, who wrote all the laws about lashon hara, was he a quiet man? Was he a man who just remained silent? On the contrary, he talked a lot. He had a lot to talk about. He talked to a lot of people. He talked about many things. And at the end of the day, when you talk, it's very hard to make sure that somehow or another you don't slip up. The greatness of the Chavetz Chaim was he talked, and he still never slipped a lashon hara. He never slipped into lashon hara, and that's the goal. And that was the chiddush. That was the novel idea that Rabbi Yanai realized from this peddler. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful evening.
What actually was potion?